Good morning and welcome to Brandenburg News Network. I am Donna Brandenburg, and welcome to the show today. I wanted to just say hi this morning before we started the episode because we're doing something a little different today. I pre-recorded today's show with a gentleman named Doug Force, and he has not only a ton of documentation, but a video documentary, a website and such, where he's documented actually how the United States and Canada have an illegitimate government and what we're looking at and the solutions to fix it. I think this is really interesting, and I want you to enjoy the show that's coming up here today. We're going to do this in different parts. So this is part one of The Myth is Canada and the United States. We're laying the groundwork. And the next one, we're going to go into step by step some of the individual elements that will come into play. Now, listening to President Trump talk about Canada, kind of tongue in cheek, talking about making it the 51st state and such, the things that he's been talking about Canada and Greenland and such, there may be some really concrete evidence to show that what happened 150 or so years ago, almost 200 years ago, laid the groundwork of illegitimizing our government. And also we can find the ways to back out of this and make it legitimate again. I invite you to enjoy the show, and I'll be back in a little while. Good morning and welcome to Brandenburg News Network. I am Donna Brandenburg. And if you're watching this was a previously recorded interview with Doug Force with The Myth is Canada. And I got to tell you, I've been looking into this, the de facto government as opposed to the de jure government. You've heard me talk about it with John Tater and such. Well, I came across Doug Force, and he is a very interesting person to me. Not only has he documented many things, including the illegitimacy of the governments of Canada and the United States, which I tend to agree with him on this. There's a huge precedent here that's been set that we don't know the history of, and we need to study this. So we're going to be recording this and playing this and developing a series of these. I don't know how many we're going to do, but this is part one. So you're with us here at the beginning of this right now. We're going to go through The Myth is Canada today and look at how this started, where Doug started with this journey, how he in fact was asked to leave the United States because he was causing trouble. He was questioning those things that they didn't want out in the public. They didn't want you and I to know. So bring on Doug right now, and we're going to talk about those subjects which shall not be discussed in fake stream media.
Well,
Doug,
thank you for having me, Donna. I'm doing great. It's been quite a run for the information that not only did I find out about in the United States, I did a very deep dive on what happened down there. I mean, I don't know whether you've heard of statutes at large in the U.S. But there's a website called Statutes at Large. You can go onto the website, and from 1791 up until when I stopped reading them was in 2005. It's everything that your Congress has done for the year, everything. and they run anywhere from 600 to 1,200 pages. And in order for me to make certain discoveries, I read probably every one of those from 1791 to 2005 over a period of a couple of years, because that was a good place to go in deep dive into the various things that they were passing in the Congress and in the Senate and so forth, and chasing some other undocumented, because everything is documented in statutes at large, everything. And so if there's a raise, if one person gets a raise, that's put in there. If they're paying a soldier an increase for his widow, that's all documented. So it's really interesting, and they do it. You can look up statutes at large and go to 2023 or 2024, and it'll be whatever Joe Biden and his ilk has done in Congress for the year. And I suggest, people are, because it's very long. I mean, these things, like I said, can run anywhere from as little as 600 pages up to as much as 12 or 1,400 pages, and they're not easy to read. But it's literally a gold mine. If you're doing a historical research on the United States, anybody that's listening in the audience, there's where you start. Okay, Declaration of Independence is, and the documents that you guys know about. So that's all wonderful. Here in Canada, they have what they call the secessional papers. And basically, that is statutes at large here in Canada, except they come in books, and they go from volumes anywhere from as little as 6 volumes up to as much I found as 12 volumes. But they do the same thing. The secessional papers are both what happened in Great Britain and in the Canadian Parliament and in the provincial parliaments. So it's very interesting. And once again, you find stuff in there that you could Google, or you could go on to Avalon or different historical websites that contain documents. Salon is another one that you won't find there. And so the whole idea for me when I do my research is to format a timeline. So when I was doing the research in the United States, I started at the Declaration of Independence and moved forward from there. And there's a lot of stuff, but we'll go into that in another podcast rather than tonight. So
what I found was really interesting was you were in the United States and you had already developed the history and sort of a documentary on Canada. And then
the documentary was Bamboozled: The Reseating of the Republic, which was for the United States, which is why they
came first.
They didn't like me. Oh yeah. And then my friend up here in Canada, a guy called, he passed away a few years ago. He's an older gentleman, Eldon Warman. I was helping him fight a little bit of an internet battle between him and this other gentleman out in Vancouver, who remain nameless for now. And he needed some history on the Magna Carta. And so I had done a deep dive on King John back in 1209 with the Law of Mortmain and the Oath of Fealty and the 1215 Magna Carta, which Pope Innocent's never signed, so it's never been ratified. It wasn't until 1225 that they made the changes necessary that the Pope would sign off on it because of the Oath of Fealty. Anyways, what happened was that it helped him defeat this other gentleman. So he gave me a letter. And that's how this all got started. Walter Cool was a backbencher in the 1930s and 40s here in Canada. And he wrote a letter to René Lévesque in 1976. René Lévesque being the premier of Quebec under the party Quebecois. And in 76, that was the first time they won and took control of Quebec. And they were separatists. That's the whole platform was, we're going to hold a referendum and we're going to leave Canada. And so they had a landslide victory. And so what happened was Walter Cool wrote this letter to René saying, and I'll paraphrase, it's, you can't have a divorce without first having a marriage. Canada is never confederated and it doesn't have a constitution. You're free to leave anytime you want. what?
Yeah, that's kind of like a shocker, right?
And so Rene goes to Ottawa and he sits down with the Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and shows him the letter. And Trudeau reads the letter and he says, yeah, so. And Levesque says, well, is it true? He says, of course. You can leave anytime you want. But here's the deal, Mr. Levesque. Anytime you saber rattle about separation, we're going to increase your transfer payments. So today, Quebec gets more transfer payments from all the other provinces than any other province by 2 to 3 times.
Wow.
And they just paid them off to shut up. Yeah.
Wow.
And,
that's the game. The game is always about the money, and follow the money. And if they want to get something done, they'll pay people. And there's very few people that have the integrity to say no.
And so when I came back to Canada after shutting down the bamboozled the City of the Republic down there, that letter was sitting on my desktop, and I thought, I opened it up and I read it again, and I thought, okay, so we don't have, according to this letter, we don't have Articles of Confederation. We never confederated. Well, that was 1867, so that started me on the road. And you could go to the mythiscanada.com on the website and look at the timeline, because I put the timeline up there. The Myth is Canada is not about a group of people. We're not talking about making this is for teaching people. I assembled the timeline because it's scattered all over. It took me 12 years to do that, to put that timeline together. So it's not like, oh, gee whiz, you could find all of this in one spot or 2 spots or 3 or 4 spots. No, ma'am. Holy no. I was over in Great Britain, in the archives over there at the Parliament, et cetera, some of it done online. Here in Canada, I went up to the archives in Ottawa. What I couldn't find online, I tried to find in person. The various provincial archives, et cetera. As a matter of fact, what's funny is I was driving across Canada this summer, back out from Ontario to Alberta. I stopped in Saskatchewan, and I went into the archives there to pick up Russell Rogers Smith's deposition with George Barr, the original, and I was able to find it, and I was like, gosh almighty, this is amazing. How cool is this? Because I'm still, it never stops. It just never stops. I get an inkling to go look for something, and sure enough, another quick example. A friend of mine sent me a volume of the secessional papers, and he said, have you seen this act that they passed in 1878? And I said, yeah, I know about that one. And then I scrolled down, because it's a big PDF file, and I scrolled down, I probably 20 or 30 pages, and I found, look at this. What's this? I've never seen this act before. And they hid it. Why? Because it's an act that actually, see, what they do with the BNN Act is say, well, that's the Articles of Confederation. That's our Constitution.
Well, and clarify that for everyone what the BNN Act is.
British North American Act.
Okay.
And it was created, and we'll go back to it. I'm just kind of bouncing a little bit right now. But sure. But this particular act was called and it was a commission that was set up in England called the Letters Patent Revocation Act. Okay. So every 4 years, you get a governor general with his letters patent. Okay. And so this act, instead of, we've jumped way ahead.
That's okay. That's what we do on Brandenburg News Network. We kind of give people a taste of things, and then we'll go back and clarify them a little bit, because this is the way that real people communicate, that we're not robots. So go ahead.
So when the letters patent were originally issued in 1867, they had 1 reading in the House of Lords, 3 readings in the House of Commons, onto the Court and Chancery for royal assent, onto the Court of St. James for Queen Victoria to bestow them onto her first Governor General. Well, Seems pretty straightforward. Time consuming, takes about 2 to 3 weeks. So they came up with an idea. In 1878, they said, we're going to set up a commission so that we don't have to go through the process of the reading in the House of Lords, the reading in the House of Commons, off to the Court of Chancery, onto the Court of St. James for Queen Victoria, then bestow it onto the next Governor General. So the commission set up that they would get the letters patent from the last Governor General, take a top sheet off, write a new letter for the next Governor General, and hand it to him and send it back to Canada. Efficient, time saving, and it was. And I came across that just by happen chance. I mean, it's not in any archive in Canada or in the UK. It was just in the secessional papers. And I'm like, holy moly. They purposefully hide things. It's not that it's not in the archive. It's just not properly filed, or it's misfiled, or something along those lines. Because it's something like this is like, it's proof, 100% proof, that BNA was not a constitution, that BNA was not Confederation papers. It was nothing more than letters patent that belonged to a Governor General. And if you read BNA, Section 12 says the Governor General is the Government of Canada with the advice of the Privy Council or alone. It's a dictatorship.
Huh.
And so BNA were his papers. They didn't belong to Canada. They're the Dominion of Canada. They belonged to him, period. That's why they could never find them in the archives. That's why in 1982, when Trudeau said, I'm going to patriate, which he made up this brand new word for the English language called patriate. And if you look it up, it means to bring to for the first time. And that's what he did. But he didn't bring the British North American Act, which they renamed Constitution Act. He brought a photocopy. And I've said to many politicians over the years, can you please point to another country on this planet that has a photocopy for their constitution? It's like,
so this is what Trudeau did. So that this is, yeah. It's kind of shocking, isn't it?
Not really, because the way that they work is they treat us like mushrooms and feed us poop and keep the lights out. And in the US, sadly, you know, what they did is they took advantage of an opportunity to switch jurisdictions. You're still a constitutional republic, by the way, but now you're under what they call martial rule, and all your courts are admiralty jurisdictional courts and no longer constitutional common law courts. And they did that because Abraham Lincoln was shot at the Ford Theater and never made it back to Congress to end Congress, sign, die in 1865. So they left Congress open. And by doing so, they were able to enact the Reconstruction Acts that were for the southern states and move them slowly over time into the northern states. By 1878, that's when they flipped your courts. That's when they took constitutional common law out of the courts. And if you read the Constitution, it says the courts can be constitutional common law. They can be maritime jurisdiction. They could be admiralty jurisdiction. They could be equity jurisdiction. So they just flipped them into. So that's why you're still a constitutional republic under martial rule, which is what the Reconstruction Acts did. So how do you fix that? It's not easy, but it can be done. That's for another podcast. So people come back and tune in, and I'll go into the detail on how to do that. That's what the movie was about.
How do you want to approach teaching people what actually happened? Now, I did watch I watched your documentary, and I thought this was really well done. Can we listen to a few minutes of this, and then is that a good place to start?
Sure, go for it.
All right, let's listen.
land of endless opportunities, extraordinary beauty, and prosperity. A place that is known for kindness, benevolence, and generosity. A place that is built on courage, integrity, and truth. Or so it appears. Yet, something doesn't feel right. Can you feel it? The underlying sense of unease and discomfort. That feeling when you know you're being deceived. And you're wondering, how big of a lie could it be? For how long have we been lied to? How much of all this is possibly a show? A well-played theatrical performance? Or maybe it's all an illusion? Is it time to see what is behind the curtain? Is it time to resist the control system? To unplug from the matrix and switch it off?
I'm kind of wondering if this is a we can play the rest of the video later on after the interview, because I think that would be a wonderful way to kind of clue people in on what's really happening here. Now, when you started putting this together, you were telling me that this was for educating a friend's children, a homeschool family, on what really happened.
Yeah.
How much of a correlation is there between what happened in Canada and what happened in the United States? It kind of looks like a very, very similar scenario, which basically delegitimizes the entirety of our government, the structure from top to bottom. And we've been running under a de facto type of organization of usurpers. Am I correct on that?
Yes, in the U.S., but you do have a constitution. Don't forget, you still are a constitutional republic. And the people, I've asked many Americans, and I'm going to ask you, do you know who the sovereign is for the United States?
That would be each one of us.
We the people, the first three words
people.
of the Constitution, mm-hmm. Exactly. And it comes down to land. You guys had, in 1862, you had the Homestead Act to have migration come out into the western states and start farming for agricultural and so forth. And basically, those are land patents. Those are allodial title. And I've asked other Americans, I said, do you know how much all the land in the United States, you do realize is under land patent? It's owned by you the people. It's not the government that owns the land. Government is very limited amount of land. They have the 10 square miles that was granted to them by the state of Virginia and the state of Maryland that allowed them to have eminent domain and become a sovereign nation. But the whole idea of all the extra land that was left over in the states, right, from the farmers and from the ranchers, et cetera, was then put to the government to issue land patents with. They weren't allowed to keep it. That's not considered their land. That land was there for, if somebody applied for a land patent, they could get it. And they had various organizations, for example, the Homestead Act 1862 was one of the big ones that brought people onto the land. And they're the land owners. What does allodial title mean, ladies and gentlemen? It means this: you own the land from the sole of your feet to the center of the earth, from the top of your head to the outer reaches of the atmosphere. It belongs to we the people, period. Not the state government, not the federal government, but we the people. But we haven't exercised our right. Here in Canada, in 1931, the Court and Chancery that held all the land on behalf of the British Empire for the Dominion of Canada turned it over to the provinces and on to the people. Why? We, in 1931, were supposed to hold a constitutional convention and put a clause for land in our Constitution so that we would have a sovereign nation. The same way in 1787, that if you read the U.S. Constitution, there's a clause in there for the 10 square miles, making you a sovereign nation. And it's always about land. Why? Because we don't make any more land. It's the most valuable possession we, the people, have, and they want it back.
That's what they've always fought over, is the land. And when you look at what happened and how they use that to control our food supply and control the people, and what's happened in the past when it comes to the extermination of the buffalo, and now what's happening with our food supply in the United States, destroying the cattle, as well as the chickens and the turkeys. We have something like that going on here, which is real topical in Michigan right now. I don't know if you know this, but the DNR is controlling 4.6 million acres here. We're on a mission to take 400 of those acres and have a solar farm put on it, which is basically tied to China. And they have a plan for another 300,000 acres to be turned into an industrialized public-private partnership nonsense. So when I see what all of these governmental agencies have done and been weaponized against the people, there's a real concern. But at the core of it, it's always about our natural resources, aka the land, because they've commandeered all of our mineral rights and our logging rights and all of that. This is what people have done. Well, they've tried. They've said it.
Because people haven't challenged them.
Correct.
And what people have to do is demand, provide proof of allodial title to the land that you say you're going to use for a wind farm, or you're going to use for the China thing that you were talking about.
Solar farm.
Solar farm. So here in Canada, we have what they call land use bylaws. That they're new land use bylaws from the UN that they're trying to force through in the municipalities and cities and so forth. And I've been teaching people to go and ask them for proof of allodial title, knowing full well that they can't provide proof of allodial title. You can't, then in your state government and your municipalities down in the US and your counties, they can't provide proof of allodial title. Why? Because the land belongs to the people, not to the county, not to the city, not to the state itself, not even to the federal government. Federal government is very limited to the amount of land that they can hold. Read the Constitution. It's right in there. That document is probably going to go down in history as one of the most amazing, well-written documents ever. I've always been a big fan of your founding fathers, Thomas. I'm a huge Jeffersonian, by the way. I love Thomas Jefferson, George Mason, Sam Adams, John Adams, all of the boys. They've done amazing in the face of the British Empire. They beat them. It was wonderful. The American people have forgotten their roots. You should be proud of your founding fathers, and not this, well, they were slave owners. How terrible was that? Excuse me, but look into what they've given you, and you have wasted it. You've allowed the usurpers to come in and take what is yours and what's your children's and grandchildren's, and you have to stop. And that's what I'm trying to do this here in Canada with people, and by educating them, explaining to them about the land under their feet and who owns that land. We do. We, the people, do. The same thing in the United States. All land in the United States is under land patent. Well, who owns the land? The people own the land. We do. Not the government. Once again, not the county, not the state. We, the people. And we have to start participating and saying, look, if you can prove that you have allodial title to that land, you can go ahead and do what you want with it. But if you can't, get the hell off our land. Because you're a mismanagement company.
Yes, and as you well stated, they are supposed to be a service company, really, to do several things that we don't want to do as the sovereigns, where they're hired to do a function. Therefore, they are public functionaries. They're not even officials. They're functionaries. They have a job to do, and they don't seem to be able to stick with the program or the job description that they have, which is clearly stated. So I think it's important to bring that up. That's beautifully said. I'd like to know more about these allodial titles, but as we're going through this, I think I'd like to use this first episode to go through the Canadian illegitimacy of the government, the current government of Canada, if that sounds like it's a reasonable way to go for you, and then we'll get into the United States maybe next week.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Actually, I was gonna segue back over to Canada. So
okay, we're gonna segue. So you got this nice flyer here. Would you like me to put that up, or would you like to go in a different direction?
no, I just want to get back to, because the flyer is a few years old and things have changed, and it needs to be updated a little bit. But it's still pretty solid for what it is there. But what's happening now in Canada with these land use bylaws, and the people here are getting very upset with the chemtrails that they've been spraying over the farmland, over the ranch land, over the cities, et cetera, and they're frustrated to a point of not really understanding how to combat this. And so that's the beautiful part of the movie, The Illusion, brings people to the understanding that, wait a minute, we're the landowners, we are the power here. We the people are the power. And we have to get involved. We have to get off the couch, get out the door, and start asking questions and demanding answers. These are not rulers. We don't have rulers here in Canada. We have public servants. Now, Mr. Trudeau would like you to believe that he's your ruler. But the reality is he's only a first minister for the de facto government, which he's supposed to be a public servant. As you have in the US, when you ran for governor of the state of Michigan, you ran to be a public servant, not to be a ruler over the state of Michigan, if I get that correctly. And so here we've got it. People are very, unlike in the US, are very polite. I'll be nice.
Canadians are very polite.
Until they, get a spoon of dog crap stuffed down their throat. Then they become not very polite. You don't want to see an angry Canadian, because angry Canadians are nobody to be buggered with. And so, but they're pushing and pushing and pushing. This is what I try to teach, is how to seat a de jure government, right? And I have a book that I wrote on the website under constitutional committees. You can download the book. It's 25 pages. It tells you how to write a constitution. Not bad. I did it 25, and it based it on the U.S. Constitution, by the way. It's a Republican form of government, because all democracies, as Thomas Jefferson said, end in tyranny. And so, and Tucker Carlson, I love him. He does some really, really, really good work. But two things that really bother me about him. A, he calls the United States a democracy. And B, he calls American citizens. There's no such thing as an American citizen. Read your Constitution. Constitution can't give citizenship to a sovereign. Sovereign is the king, not a citizen. So he needs to start using the proper terminology, U.S. Constitution, or I'm sorry, U.S. citizen, because that the 14th Amendment gave you U.S. citizenship. Here in Canada, this is funny. So in 1946-47, they wanted to, because we were nobody, we weren't a Canadian citizen, you had no citizenship. They still thought we were British subjects. So in 1946, they created the Canadian Citizenship Act, which is about 2 pages. And basically it said, because I find this funny, we're no longer calling Canadians British subjects. We're now calling them Canadian citizens. Sorry, what? So it's a name change? That's all it is? There's no
1,700 different
legality or law. There was nothing. And it was funny. But people, they don't, what's the right word for this? They don't involve themselves in understanding the law that everybody should be very knowledgeable of the law. And the law should never be complicated. The reason they complicate it is so that the average Joe can't understand it. If you look at, what was it? The criminal code here in Canada is 1,800 pages. Just the criminal code. Hello? You do harm to somebody, so you beat them up. You cause them to, go to the hospital, et cetera, you kill somebody. Anything that you're going to do harm, you steal from them, that's doing harm. It's not 1,800 pages, that's for sure. So what's all the other stuff? It's non-victim, or what they call victimless crimes. And Canada, holy moly, province, city, the bylaws, all this stuff, it's all victimless crime. Parking tickets, you name it, a speeding ticket, everything. This is just a money generation for the state or for the province or for the city. And we go along with this. We go, and I don't know if you've ever been to Toronto.
I have.
Toronto it is actually quite a beautiful city. And the mismanagement of I was a campaign manager for one of the mayoral candidates in 2023. And the city is so mismanaged. They have my car, it's a little minivan. I have a minivan, and driving down the street, and I hit a pothole, and I broke the rear shock. Just snapped it right off. The pothole was that deep. So I go get that fixed, and a week and a half or 2 weeks later, I broke the front strut on a pothole, and I had to get that replaced. This is a beautiful city that's world renowned, and this is on the main streets of the city. This is ridiculous how mismanaged we are, and people once again need to wake up to this. They ensured that my candidate didn't win the election by stealing it and installing a communist. Olivia Chow is a card-carrying communist. She's very upfront about it too. And her idea of balancing the budget was, I'm going to increase property tax by 6% across the board.
I love how it's always about spending. They think they're going to spend themselves to some sort of weird prosperity instead of cutting, and that somehow that gets missed.
Well, and Chris's platform was, we're going to cut waste and we're going to cut corruption. And we found out later, after the election, after they stole it, that that would have exposed some very, very, very high-profile people who were literally stealing money from the city, just putting it in their pocket, taking it out of wheelbarrows, and just, it was. But at the end of the day, it's all fiat currency. So here's the fun thing about Canada: we seat a de jure government in each of the provinces through the same way that you guys did in the United States in the 1780, when you had a constitutional convention in Philadelphia, right? Where you elected the delegates from the 13 original states who went to the convention and wrote the Constitution for the United States. Now, you know that it went out in, was it 1789? And it was rejected. It didn't get ratified. So they had, and the people spoke up and said, wait a minute, we want a Bill of Rights in that Constitution. Not a Bill of Privileges, but a Bill of Rights, so that the government knows what rights they are protecting, the unalienable rights of the people. And that's why I love the Second Amendment to the Constitution. I just think that is the best of the best of the best, because without the Second Amendment, the rest of the Constitution isn't worth the.
And that's what they keep trying to do, is disarm us.
Well, they want the minute you're disarmed. Look at Australia. Did you see during the pandemic?
Oh yeah.
The cops on the beach, they're walking on and they tackled this woman on the grass and put her hands behind her back, put the cuffs on her, and forcibly put a mask on her face. I was like, holy crap. God, I've still got my guns up here in Canada. Because he ain't going to do that to me. And it's just, but it gets ridiculous, but that's what happens. And the United States, I was reading a headline today, funny enough. The Democrat side of, now that Trump has taken power, are now exercising their right on the Second Amendment by going and buying lots of guns.
It's funny. That's kind of funny, isn't it?
It is, where they are all like, "Oh, take the guns away." So here in Canada, we can go through the same process and seat de jure government in each of the provinces by holding a constitutional convention, electing our delegates, and writing a constitution. That's very, very important. Why? Because this way we have a de jure government, no longer de facto. And if the de facto government was trying to interfere with us, and I give you a quick for example. In the Donbass, in the Ukraine, in 2022, the Donbass held a referendum about joining Russia. And they had like 97% of the population voted in favor, and Putin accepted. And then Mr. Gutierrez from the United Nations came along and said, no, we're not gonna accept this. It doesn't work that way. And Mr. Putin was very polite, very nice. And he said, so Mr. Gutierrez, under the UN Charter, Section 1, or Part 2, is very clear. So you've made changes to this unilaterally without informing 193 countries that we no longer have the right of self-determination. Is that correct, Mr. Gutierrez? And Mr. Gutierrez says, no. You're right, Mr. Putin. We recognize the Donbass and what they've done. And it was hilarious. I mean, I'm doing a little acting here, but it was similar to what Gutierrez did. And so right there, emblazoned in the United Nations Charter, the people of planet Earth, 193 countries, have the right to self-determination. We have the right to seat a government we want or join a government we want. It's up to the people, not up to whoever thinks they're in power over us, because they're not. They are public servants, and do your job as a public servant and serve the public. And so here in Canada, that's what I've been teaching. So I give the history lesson, which is what this little movie does, gives you the history lesson and shows you that you've, by going through the history, Doug's right. We do have the right to seat a de jure government. It's all there in black and white. It's in the documentation. The Statute of Westminster, probably the most important document we have here in Canada, that allowed Canada to go from being a united colony to sovereign nation status. Okay, but we didn't have a de jure government, but we had the status to seat a de jure government. And all I'm saying to the people is we need to stand up and exercise our rights. That's it. And it's not like we need to grab the guns and go and overthrow the de facto government. No. As a matter of fact, we can hold a constitutional convention with our elected delegates. And if the de facto government decides to intervene or interfere, the United Nations will step in. The United States will definitely step in. England would step in and say, boys, back off, or we're going to send military and force you to back off. Now, the only people that the Canadian military would support what we're doing anyways. I know that to be a fact. And so the Trudeau and everybody else might be put up against a wall if they tried to interfere, which might not be such a bad thing.
I have a question for you with a constitutional convention, because at this point in time, I've spoken out at length about not having one because we've got so many traitors that don't even know the actual Constitution and or what we're fighting for. That my concern is that I'm not sure that we have the integrity in order to have a constitutional convention, because right now the constitution that we have is the only thing that's stopping the traitors in the global scene from steamrolling over us. And it's one of those things that until we have integrity, honesty, and all of those characteristics that are selfless as servants, wouldn't that put everything in jeopardy at this point? Because we need to go through and clean house. The people that are sitting there right now in the United States have committed treason. There's so many treasonous individuals that the first step is to go through and nail every one of these people for treason, give them a one-way ticket to a nice sunny place called Gitmo, and make the appointment with God Almighty for them because they have committed acts of treason. And unless we do that, take that step to clean house, I am a little concerned that a constitutional convention will be nothing more than a globalist rodeo here, a goat rodeo that we're watching.
I would not. I would fight if I'm a patriot of the United States, and if I'm one of we the people, I would fight to my death to stop that.
That's how I feel too, because though it's something that's allowable, and the only ones I've seen try to push that in the United States have been very, very clearly observable political operatives, or I'm just going to say they're feds.
So you want to fix the problem in the United States? How well
Yes,
do you know? How well do you know the Donald?
How well do I know him?
Yeah.
I think he's established a pattern, a very interesting pattern of pulling things out in the open to educate people. That's his pattern. His pattern is to educate the people so that the people can have the education and the information to do what we need to do to return the government to the people.
So here's how he can do it. He's the only president that can do it because he has never.
Just a minute, sorry. Go ahead.
He's the only president that can do it. There's not a member of Congress, not a member of the Senate, not a speaker, not part of the Supreme Court could actually do this. But what did I say? That what happened in 1865? When Abraham Lincoln banged the gavel, sign die in 1861 after the Confederate States left Congress, he left Congress open. They have never closed it. They've made sure that it stays open, and that's where they did their moves. So Donald Trump could go into Congress and stand at the podium at the end of Congress, pick up the gavel and close it de jure. At which point the feds, the marshals, U.S. Marshals would have arrest every single member of Congress, Senate, and the Supreme Court for treason and hang them all. And you would have a clean slate, and your republic would come back under constitutional common law. All the courts, the admiralty flags would be taken down. You would have now constitutional common law courts. Martial rule would be ended, and you would have your republic back.
And what do you do in the states?
Well, the states they will go ahead and as it was under the original Constitution, which is where you were going back to, the governor appoints a senator to go sit in the Senate, and should only be 50 seats, because the way a republic is designed is the Senate was designed to protect the rights of the states. The Congress was under general election was to protect the rights of the people, and then the Electoral College, who appointed through election the president and the vice president. Okay, that was done as the executive is oversight on both the Congress and the Senate, whereas you had the last resort, which was, guess what? The Supreme Court. And they're the ones who are the final arbitrators on keeping the government in check. Now that's a constitutional republic. And that's what the rest of the parasitical world of these globalist I call them globalist parasites, don't know.
I do too. That's what I call them. That's like, it's a global crime syndicate, and these people are parasites.
And they don't want that, because that is the beacon of light and hope for the rest of the world into the future. Because once that's done, then it's over for all of the rest of them. And I hate to say this, but Putin you get more freedom in Russia under Vladimir Putin than you do in the United States under Joe Biden.
I actually like Putin. It's not that I have any human heroes really per se. I mean, I've got people that I like some of what they do, and maybe they could improve in some area, but he really has done a lot right in Russia. He's done a lot right. He's got people on small farms. He has returned people basically to the land, not the global crime syndicate, the economic crime syndicate that's basically using their power to install their puppets to make them bigger. I mean, it's a self-perpetuating system of overtaking the world through economic means and globalization, collectivism, all of this sort of thing. And he's pretty much resisted all of that, as well as defending his own people. He's done what he should have done.
Well, and that's the beautiful part of that. And beyond that, he's now working with what they call the BRICS nation and with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. China has the Belt and Road Initiative, which is to help elevate, because China isn't looking for conquest, they're looking for customers. It's like they're the big mass producer. They're looking for supply lines and customers. And so the Belt and Road Initiative was designed to elevate third world countries into a status of customers, that they can be sold the finished products that China produces, which is interesting. And what we're seeing now is a multipolar world taking place on the other side of the world. And I've said to people here in Canada, I said, start seating our de jure governments in our provinces, we need to join that multipolar world. If you guys ever get to reseat the republic under your constitution, maybe Mr. Trump can do this, then join the multipolar world, because that's the beautiful part of this. You're not gunboat diplomacy. You're now sitting at the table negotiating and working with humanity to elevate humanity. And that is so vitally important. Like, we're at a tipping point right now. If you look at what's going on in the Middle East, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Israel, in Palestine, and throughout Yemen, and so forth, it's a tinderbox, right? You don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next, and it's going to get crazier and crazier unless we stop. Somebody has to have the sanity to say enough is enough, and we're not going to do this anymore. And I don't know whether that's Donald Trump, whether that's Xi Jinping, whether that's Vladimir Putin, but somebody has to say, because we can end this beautiful planet off of, somebody stubbing their toe and pushing a button. I'm making a joke of it, but you thank God Joe Biden never got his hands on the football, and that never left the Pentagon. You know that, right?
Well, yeah. The concern that I have is it's the U.S. intelligence involved that's really running a lot of this and using the drug cartels as their little paramilitary chaos makers on the street to cause enough chaos to make everything unintelligibly discerned, on what's really going on, and to continue to tear down the nation. And when you look at the CIA, Mossad, GCHQ, all of them, they're pretty well one organization. And it's pretty simple when you really actually look at how they put this together. And I don't know, I guess I have a lot of questions. Let's go back to Canada and what the steps were that took Canada down. And can we simplify it a little bit, and then we'll play the video after this. And And then let's determine what we're going to do next time. Maybe what we should do is put like an outline together just on the topics we're covering, so that it's a way that everybody can understand what really happened to Canada in the United States, and that we have an illusion of a legitimate government, but we don't. And that's why we have illegitimate governments in place right now. This is something they don't want out in any way, shape, or form. And how they have rigged this all using their a pretended law to enslave not only the United States and Canada, but the world.
It's called color of law, by the way.
Color of
It
law.
hasn't. Well, the thing that we're looking for is law of the land, which is what the United States is based on. That's the Constitution of the United States. That's the common law of the land is, and we had it here in Canada. When the Dominion of Canada, our courts in Canada under the Dominion, yes, it was a united colony, but it was English common law. Once again, law of the land. The conversion, which is what happened in the States in between 1865 and 1878, conversion moved you from law of the land to law of the sea under admiralty jurisdiction. Here in Canada, in 1982, they did the Constitution Act 1982-1867. Now, they call it the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but really all they did was create a ship at sea. And I've said that, and people can look this up themselves, and I've said this, I said, if you read and understand what it is that they've done, the head of state, which is supposed to be the King of England, that's our head of state, who has his man or woman being the Governor General, his jurisdiction, you have to go to Oceans Act 8.1, because his jurisdiction, it says very clearly that the King and Right of Canada has jurisdiction on the seabed, or more easily said, all land underwater. So if he's not a fish in the ocean, he must be standing on a deck of a ship called the Government of Canada, and it is. And the birth for the Government of Canada, Inc. is Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, which is a port. Yeah. And so that's why if you look at there's all kinds of documentation that protect PEI, or Prince Edward Island. It's a little tiny, yeah. And that's why, is because of that. And people, we are in maritime jurisdiction, not admiralty like in the United States, but we're a maritime courts. And it's legal fictions. And so what is a legal fiction? Well, a person is a legal fiction. And like a man or a woman, being you and I, we are blood, and we have law of the land, and we have victim crimes only. So if I do harm to you, physical harm or mental harm that can be proven, or that I've stolen from you, that I take your car without your permission, this is law of the land. Now, law of the sea, being the victimless crimes, are, well, you're going to give you a speeding ticket. You're going to get a parking ticket. You need to have a license to go fishing. You need to have a license to go hunting. You need to have a license to open a barber shop. All of these things are taxes on we the people. But they don't tax the man or the woman. Why? Because we have unalienable rights. Unalienable rights, and they know it. They know they can't tax the man or the woman. So they created this person or personage, right? This all capitalized version of your name. Look at your driver's license. Look at your birth certificate. Look at your passport. It's all capitalized. Why? Because that's not you, the woman. That's you, the person. And that's who they tax. That way, because they know that if they tax the man, they're going to the gallows, because that's an infringement upon your unalienable rights. Your founding fathers emblazoned within the Constitution the Bill of Rights. And that's not all the rights that you have unalienable. Unalienable rights are God-given, creator-given. Mr. Thomas Jefferson said so eloquently in the Declaration of Independence that the Creator gave us unalienable rights, the right to life, the right to liberty, and the right to pursuit of happiness. Doesn't get any clearer than that. And they know it, which is why they license you for pretty much everything these days. I mean, you can't, even gun licenses now you need to have in certain states. You can't even buy a gun without buying a license to buy the gun. It gets ridiculous. But at the end of the day, we can take it all back because we've always had the power. And we have to stop. First what thing you want to do is stop consenting. The second thing you want to do is educate yourself as to how to fix the problem and do it, because you're going to find a solution in history. That's where it is, ladies and gentlemen. It's in history. It's there. And they want to hide it from you. They won't teach it to you at school. Why? Because what government is going to teach you how to overthrow them? It's just not going to happen. And so the only way that we win is to educate ourselves and say no. And that's it. And then we can fix the problem. We need, and I really hope Mr. Trump does what he says he's going to do. I hope he is the man that most people would like to think he is and why he got elected. Sadly, he's got people around him that are going to work against him. I hope that he's able to deal with them in an efficient manner. That's all.
Well, I think going back to it, it's like to the term of like overthrowing the government. I think it's more appropriate to say remove those who are usurping their duties as public functionaries, and addressing the evil and the law breaking that they've done to handle business and bring it back into what it was supposed to be, because they are the ones that broke the law. They are the ones that have broken public trust. They've even broken their oaths of office, and they have not been in there to serve the people. They are parasites. They're victimizers. They're greedy. They have grabbed whatever they can do. If you've ever seen the amount of investments these people have in their portfolios from insider trading, and from the money laundering that's going on and the racketeering that's going on within our nation. This is not overthrowing a government. This is holding people who have broken the law, who have committed acts of treason, and removing them for the crimes that they have committed against the United States, against Canada, against the world, and the crimes against humanity, which they have participated in. And it's pretty clear, I think, to most of us who have been paying attention, at least even a little bit here. And I truly hope and pray that Donald Trump, President Trump, the rightful president of the United States, gets in there and really turns this thing right around. And I have great hope in that direction. I really do. So,
and he talks about draining the swamp and the deep state, getting rid of the deep state, et cetera, et cetera. Article 10 of the 10th Amendment of the Constitution says that anything that the federal government cannot do belongs to the states or to the people. So the federal government says, well, there's no, if we exceed that, we have no penalties. And they're right, there is no penalty if they exceed it. So they exceeded it 485 times. In other words, you have all of these departments of this, departments of that, all of them. What's her name? Hiawatha, Elizabeth Warren. She has a department just for herself. That's where she washes her money through. Okay, yeah. You got 400. So that, by the way, that's the deep state. That's the bureaucracy that sucks the money out of the pockets of the working class.
And it needs to be nullified, all of it. And through Norton versus Shelby County, none of them stand. And also the Chevron decision that went through it, I believe that we're going in the right direction, because not only has it been reaffirmed, like Norton versus Shelby County has been affirmed by Judge Cannon, and then the Chevron decision and all of this, you can see the motion going in the correct direction to restore the United States as a constitutional republic as it was intended to be, not the way that they've done it right now, in my opinion. And then when you look at the states, and you're talking about the 10th Amendment, which is states' rights, we also have an obligation, if there is a government of the other states, in my opinion, to defend them also against the usurpers that have encroached, like Gretchen Whitmer, Dana Nessel, and Jocelyn Benson in the and the entire legislature of
Don't
the
forget
state of Michigan.
the New York governor too. What's her name? Hochul.
Yeah, they're and you've got them all over the place. That there is, and I was told at one point in time that we only needed one honest governor to write the entire United States. One honest governor could walk in there and just pull the plug on this thing and turn it around to the way that it's supposed to be, and all the money laundering away from the United States to Ukraine, to everywhere. I mean, they're playing money fetty everywhere with what they're grabbing, with the economic money laundering that's going on through these big corporations, through BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street Capital, all of this stuff that's going on. That's just the beginning of it. I mean, we could sit here and list these companies off for months and never get to the end of it. So and then you can go into the 501c3s and that sort of thing, and the NGOs that are out there. I mean, there's so much complexity out there. It takes just a couple of really strong leaders and they will pull the plug on it. But people are going to have to walk away from the asset capturing people, their minds. The battle right now in the 5th generation warfare we're in is for the minds of the people to allow this to continue into perpetuity.
Well, and the people have. The U.S. Congress created the Federal Reserve in 1913. That was an act of Congress. The people can elect officials to repeal the Federal Reserve. You guys have, within your own constitution, the ability to create your own money. That's a sovereign nation. The only reason the Federal Reserve was created was because the Congress didn't want to go back and ask the people permission to borrow money. Yeah, they just wanted to borrow money into perpetuity. And so that's why the Federal Reserve was created. If people today, for example, understood that they don't have to be taxpayers in the United States, there's a little thing called Title 12 USC 411. Title 12 USC 411 says that you could go into any Federal Reserve bank or the United States Treasury and exchange your Federal Reserve notes for lawful money of the United States, US dollars, Treasury issued US dollars, untaxable US dollars. How cool is that?
That is cool. I'd like to learn more about that. We should do a whole episode on that alone.
Well, that's it in a nutshell, though. Really, that's it. If you're interested, I can send you how to set up the bank account with a letter put on the bank account that only allows Title 12 USC 411.
That quite honestly merits some time, I think.
Sure.
All of these bits of information, I do think that we needed to get into them and spend a little more time on them. So
Sure.
With that said, I think what I want to do is go ahead and say thank you so much for being on here today. Well, we're about an hour, and then the documentary is about an hour. So I'm going to stack that up right after this so that people can see what we're talking about, and that you can follow the timeline and you can see exactly, and I mean exactly, what's gone on in Canada. The next time we'll go through again what's gone on in the United States. Now, do you have a documentary ready for that, or are you still working on that?
I would like to say that because it's been over 10 years since Chip and I worked on this. It takes money to do that, and right now neither Chip or I have the. Chip was my writer-director, and I co-wrote the screenplay with him. He's from Southern California, He was a really cool cat. And now the people that we had were going to be involved with the thing are no longer going to be available. So we would have to do at least a good rewrite to the screenplay.
Could we do a PowerPoint, and that we could do like it in a PowerPoint?
Because, and this is the reason why the PowerPoint would probably be about 300 or 400 panels in order to get that kind of information out. We were going to use vignettes, historical vignettes with certain actors doing certain things that we would compress the timeline, right, and so forth. It was a really interesting doc because it was something that nobody had tried before. It was a solutionist documentary. So we went through, this is the problem, and this is how you fix it. Pretty cool, eh?
Yeah, very cool.
And so I was going to do something similar here in Canada with how to fix the problem here in Canada. And so, but over the years, it's been now 12, 14, 15. Holy crap, it's been a long time. Excuse me. I'm old. Anyways, but and so the documentary fell off. The idea fell off because the amount of time I needed to do the research, which was about 12 years, the documentary just kind of fell beside the wayside. It wasn't until last year that Tim and I started to talk, because he wanted to teach his kids with this PowerPoint, and this is what came out. And I'm very proud to say that this would have been the documentary I would have loved to have produced for the Myth is Canada myself. But Tim, being the man that he is, did an amazing job. I mean, really amazing what he did. I mean, yes, I helped him write the thing. Okay? I'll take a co-writer's credit for that. But it was him who did what you're seeing there with that. But he is an actual movie producer. That's what he does for his living, which is really cool.
Well, it's wonderful. Well, we're gonna end this right now, and then the next segment will be the documentary that the Myth is Canada, and stick with us and get to know this sort of thing. And then the next we're gonna do part 2, 3, 4, whatever. We're gonna continue on this until we get all this information out to the people, where we can maybe organize and start reversing what has been done. Because I think that President Trump is going to do some amazing things, but we have to be ready to carry the ball. This is a team effort thing. Everyone needs to be involved in this. We can't sit back any longer and let other people run this nation for us. We have to be part of the process. This is a participation sport. This is not a where we get to sit in the stands and just be observers. We have to participate in this. If we want self-governance, that means that we got to get involved. So we're gonna go to the movie next, enjoy the show, and we'll be back with the next part later on. And thank you so much for being here. Okay, guys, thank you for sticking with us. I'm going to take a real quick break, and then I'll cue up the documentary. And it's well worth your time to watch this. I think that Doug and Tim have done an amazing job. Lots of information. There's kind of a timeline here, and it's going to be worth your time. I'll be right back. right, ready to go. Enjoy the show. Hang on one second. We have a little bit of technical difficulty here. Hang on 1 minute. I think I need to make a little bit of a change here. Hold on. This is what you get. Live news for real people by real people at the kitchen table. So here you go. Let's try that again. Yeah, there you go.
Canada. A land of endless opportunities, extraordinary beauty, and prosperity. A place that is known for kindness, benevolence, and generosity. A place that is built on courage, integrity, and truth. Or so it appears. Yet, something doesn't feel right. Can you feel it? The underlying sense of unease and discomfort. That feeling when you know you're being deceived, and you're wondering, how big of a lie could it be? For how long have we been lied to? How much of all this is possibly a show? A well-played theatrical performance? Or maybe it's all an illusion? Is it time to see what is behind the curtain? Is it time to resist the control system? To unplug from the matrix and switch it off? In 1759, at the Battle of the Plains of Abraham, Great Britain defeated France and renamed the colony to the province of Quebec. In 1776, the 13 British colonies to the south declared independence from Great Britain and formed the United States of America. In 1791, the Constitutional Act divided the province of Quebec into the provinces of Lower Canada and Upper Canada. In 1840, the Act of Union merged the colonies of Upper Canada and Lower Canada into the province of Canada. In 1864, at the Quebec Conference, delegates from each colony discussed the desire to form a federal union, while each province would retain its independence and autonomy under the umbrella of a constitutional monarchy. From 1861 to 1865, during the American Civil War between the Union, the North, and the Confederacy, the South, Great Britain built warships for the Confederacy, armed with British weapons. Many merchant ships of the Union were destroyed by the Confederate Army in Great Britain. When Lincoln won the war, he sought claims from Great Britain, but Great Britain refused. The Union even threatened to declare war and annex British North America in 1866. In 1866, John A. Macdonald, chairman of the delegates from the colonies, participated in finalizing the Kingdom of Canada Bill at the London Conference to draft the BNA Act. Great Britain had a dilemma: risk a possible war with the United States of America, pay reparations for the sinking of the Union's ships, grant the colonies in Canada self-governance. Queen Victoria needed a clever solution. Lord Thring's brilliant scheme: keep the Canadian colonies and make them pay the reparations to the United States of America through taxation, while deceiving the colonies into thinking that they govern themselves. On March 29, 1867, the British North America Act received royal assent, meaning it was formally approved by the court and chancery. It went into effect on July 1, 1867, and created a united colony known as the Dominion of Canada. Until 1982, July 1st was celebrated as Dominion Day. Since 1982, July 1st has been celebrated as Canada Day, when the BNA Act was renamed the Constitution Act. Let us take a closer look at the original BNA Act 1867. This is the intended preamble. And it states, by reason of the request of the colonies for federal government, it is expedient therefore that they have laws and regulations to guide them. This is the modified preamble. And it states, whereas the provinces of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick have expressed their desire to be federally united into one dominion under the Crown. The 1889 Interpretation Act defined a British possession to be any part of a dominion, and it defined the term colony to be any part of a dominion. The Dominion of Canada was clearly a colony of Great Britain and not an independent country. The colony did not confederate in 1867. The BNA Act was not brought back to Canada for the United Colony to sign and ratify. The original BNA Act is located in the United Kingdom and has always been the property of the United Kingdom and not Canada. Section 2 of the BNA Act 1867 declares that the provisions of this act extend to the heirs and successors of the kings and queens of Great Britain. Section 109 of the BNA Act 1867 states that all lands, minerals, and royalties belonging to the several provinces of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick at the Union shall belong to the several provinces of Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. All natural resources belong to the various colonies, with exceptions as per Section 109. More land was to be added to the Dominion of Canada through use. If the Dominion could use the land, then they could claim the land. In 1868, through the Rupert's Land Act, use of land was purchased from the Hudson's Bay Company. in 1870 through the Manitoba Act, and in 1871 through the British Columbia Terms of Union. In 1871, the Treaty of Washington was concluded. It settled the claims between the United Kingdom and the United States of America, even though the United Kingdom never admitted any wrongdoing. However, it is interesting to see whose names also show up. Sir John Alexander MacDonald, Knight Commander of the Most Honorable Order of the Bath, a member of Her Majesty's Privy Council for Canada, and Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Her Majesty's Dominion of Canada, and Montague Bernard. The Privy Council is a formal body of advisors to the monarch of the United Kingdom, in this case, Queen Victoria, meaning John A. Macdonald represented Great Britain. In 1867, Macdonald was appointed, and not voted in, as Prime Minister by the Governor-General at the time, Lord Monck. In 1854, Macdonald, a Freemason since 1844, became a member of the Order of the Masonic Knights Templar. Macdonald got engaged to the much younger Susan Agnes Bernard, cousin of Montague Bernard, who worked with British royalty in London in December of 1866. They married in February of 1867, 1 month before the BNA Act was signed. John A. Macdonald was the one who helped Queen Victoria achieve her grand scheme of deceiving the colonists into thinking they were now self-governed and had confederated. He received generous titles, appointments in the British monarchy, and a much younger second wife in addition to his annual salary of $5,000 equivalent to $125,000 today, in return for a betrayal of the colonists. In the Treaty of Washington, 1871, John A. Macdonald agreed to give the San Juan Islands and Point Roberts to the United States of America, in addition to granting equal rights to the fisheries for 10 years, because he was representing Great Britain and not the Dominion of Canada. How can he be called the father of Confederation and a hero by some when a confederation was never achieved, and when he in fact betrayed the colonists? By means of the Letters Patent Revocation Act, 1878, the British monarchy instituted the office of Governor-General of the Dominion on a permanent basis. The most important part is found in Section 9 of the Act. The British monarchy declared full power and authority through letters patent, including their heirs and successors. Letters patent are an official declaration used to grant patent rights by the Crown and Chancery to officially grant titles and office to people, or make other declarations. With this Letters Patent Revocation Act, Section 2 of the BNA Act, 1867, was now redundant. Recall, the provisions of this act extend to the heirs and successors of the kings and queens of Great Britain. On June 19, 1893, the Statute Law Revision Act was passed. With it, Queen Victoria explicitly repealed Section 2 of the BNA Act, 1867. This Statute Law Revision Act, 1893, was never repealed after it was passed, and Section 2 of the BNA Act, 1867, was never reenacted. Queen Victoria died on January 22, 1901, from a brain hemorrhage while residing at Osborne House. Interestingly, during the same time as Guglielmo Marconi fired up a very powerful radio wave antenna just 12 miles away. With her death, the BNA Act died as well, due to the repeal of Section 2. Did this remove the British monarchy? No, because of the Letters Patent Revocation Act, 1878. Did this end the Dominion of Canada? No, because of the Letters Patent Revocation Act, 1878, and the Interpretation Act, 1889. Recall the definition of the term colony. The Dominion of Canada and the British monarchy carried on under Edward VII. More land was added via use to the Dominion of Canada between 1898 and 1905. In 1898, through the Yukon Territory Act. In 1905, through the Alberta Act. And in 1905, through the Saskatchewan Act. Who owned the land of the Dominion of Canada? Did the land of the Dominion of Canada belong to the monarch? No. The Crown and Chancery held the title to all British lands, including the Dominion of Canada. The Crown and Chancery is the Department of Lands of Britain. It was established by the Privy Council. The Crown is a corporation sole. It represents the state in all its aspects. It can be used to refer to the office of the monarch or the monarchy as institutions. It can be used to refer to the rule of law or the functions of executive, legislative, and judicial governance. This is why all government and public land was called Crown land until it was granted by means of a Crown grant, also referred to as a land patent. The monarch was just a figurehead. The king or queen was not a sovereign any longer because they did not own the land. The governor general had more authority. He was also a corporation sole, given the sole government of the colony, with the assistance of members of the Privy Council and appointed by the Crown and Chancery. What is the difference between a monarch and a sovereign? Authority of government originates in the title to land. A king or queen is a sovereign when he or she has absolute authority over the land, and thus absolute power. A king or queen becomes a monarch when he or she does not have absolute authority over the land. The king or queen alone has no power. The title to all British lands was held by the Crown and Chancery and not by the king or queen. All government and public land was called Crown land. The Governor-General had sole authority to govern Canada as a corporation sole with the advice of the Privy Council. He was appointed by the commission created in 1878 and not by the King or the Queen or the House of Commons or the House of Lords. In September of 1926, Russell Rogers Smith of the Native Sons of Canada, a movement aimed at fostering national spirit, creating Canadian nationality, adopting a Canadian flag, and having more autonomy, presented a resolution to the Prime Minister, Mackenzie King. One main request of that resolution was the necessity of elevating Canada constitutionally to the status of a sovereign nation and to confer on Canada an equality of status with Great Britain. It requested an equal and independent sovereignty under the Crown of Canada. Another request was that Great Britain should not be allowed to make Canada pay for any claims that may arise out of Great Britain's defense actions. Another important request was that all natural resources of Canada belong to the people of Canada and not Great Britain. The resolution further requested that the roles and authority of the Governor General be fundamentally changed for the benefit of Canada. As we will see, it was the work of Russell Rogers Smith that would have paved the path to real freedom. In October of 1926, at the Imperial Conference in London, led by Lord Arthur J. Balfour, Mackenzie King, and representatives of the other dominions of Great Britain met to discuss and determine the status between Great Britain and the dominions of Canada, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and the Irish Free State. The report concluded that the dominions are autonomous communities within the British Empire, equal in status, in no way subordinate one to another in any aspect of their domestic or external affairs, though united by a common allegiance to the Crown, and freely associated as members of the British Commonwealth of Nations. This was scheduled to be made law with the enactment of the Statute of Westminster on December 11, 1931. Prior to the enactment of the Statute of Westminster, the Government of Canada was composed of a Governor-General and a select committee of the Imperial Privy Council, one of which headed the Supreme Court of Canada. Any member of the Imperial Privy Council was a member of the Government of Canada. The House of Commons, the Senate of Canada, the Privy Council for Canada, which was appointed by the Governor-General, and the Lieutenant Governors of the provinces were to aid and advise the Governor-General and the government. The Governor-General was the sole government. Neither the Legislative Assembly nor the House of Commons were responsible to the Canadian people. They were responsible to the Governor-General only. Each Lieutenant Governor, appointed by the Governor-General, was also a corporation sole, acting as the representative of the Governor-General, and not as a representative of elected representatives or the people. As we will see, the Statute of Westminster is the most important document in the history of the landmass known as Canada. We will only look at the three key sections of the Statute of Westminster that apply to the Dominion of Canada. These are: Section 2 removed colonial law from the Dominion of Canada. Recall, the Dominion of Canada was defined as a colony of Great Britain. No law made by the Parliament of a Dominion is void just because it may not be in accordance with British law. This section does not apply to Australia because Australia had a so-called constitution in 1901 and was not a dominion in 1931. Let's look at Section 11 before looking at Section 7. Section 11 of the Statute of Westminster severed the connection between the Dominion and a colony of Great Britain. What does this mean? The key word is notwithstanding. It means Section 11 overrides the Interpretation Act of 1889, which defined the term colony. The provinces were not joined as one colony of Great Britain any longer, and each province was also not a colony of Great Britain any longer. Who owned the land now? The people of each province naturally took ownership of the land. This also removed the Governor-General because the Crown and Chancery lost the allodial title to the land. There is no intermediate status between that of a colony and that of a sovereign state. No confederation happened because the provinces had never been sovereign states. Section 11 finally raised each province of Canada from the position of a colony to that of a sovereign state. Section 7 is misleading in how it deals with the applicability of this statute to Canada. Subsection 1 attempts to exclude the BNA Act from this statute. However, the BNA Act was only a statute, a guide of the Imperial Parliament to aid the Governor-General. It could only be effective if there is a duly appointed Governor General. See Section 12 of the BNA Act, 1867. Since the Crown and Chancery, who appoints the Governor General, gave up a laudial title to the land, thanks to Section 11, there can be no more Governor General. The result is, this subsection is redundant. Subsection 2 clarifies that Section 2 of the statute removing colonial law also applies to any of the provinces. This makes each province a sovereign state, nation, or country, because confederation never happened. Only sovereign states can join into a confederation, and the provinces were not sovereign until the Statute of Westminster was passed. Subsection 3 clarifies that the provinces can only act within their boundaries and cannot impose laws on any other province. But what is the Parliament of Canada now? Is Canada defined? In summary, Section 2 removed colonial law from the Dominion of Canada as it was a colony of Great Britain. Section 7 removed colonial law from each province. Section 11 removed the status of colony, which immediately ended the Dominion of Canada. It also immediately removed the Governor General. There is no intermediate status between that of a colony and that of a sovereign state. Sovereignty and the ownership of land go hand in hand. No confederation happened because the provinces had never been sovereign states. Each province of Canada was now for the first time a sovereign state. This status has not changed since December 11, 1931. No province has held a constitutional convention. No province has seated a de jure, lawful government. Extremely important. Every politician, every governor general, every prime minister, every law, every act, everything has been illegitimate since December 11th, 1931. Anything that was passed after this date is not applicable to the people of each province. Has freedom been hiding in plain sight for over 90 years? What happened after the Statute of Westminster was passed? Did the people in each province hold constitutional conventions and seat a de jure government? Sadly, no. Russell Rogers Smith said in the 1940s. What does the future hold? Is Canada to become an armed camp, each at the other's throat? Or can we unite to create a federal union, mutually adopting a constitution? It is very likely that many people did not comprehend at the time what the Statute of Westminster had actually achieved. The Great Depression also impacted many people who were desperately looking for help. In addition, it is likely that many of the politicians at the time did also not comprehend what the passing of the Statute of Westminster really meant. It seems that those who did know simply continued as if nothing had happened. After all, there was a lot to lose. Recall Section 109 of the BNA Act. In 1936, the Parliament of Canada attempted to revise the Statute of Westminster. They wanted to revise Section 7 of the statute to give the Parliament of Canada the power to enact a federal constitution and to continue the BNA Act until such constitution was in place. Did the Parliament have this power? Was the Parliament legitimate? Parliament also tried to amend the BNA Act. However, the BNA Act cannot be implemented without a Governor General. The Governor General used to be appointed by the Crown and Chancery, but the Crown and Chancery lost the title to the land. From the official website of the Governor General of Canada. Until 1931, Canada's Governor General was chosen by the sovereign. This changed when the Canadian government began to make recommendations for the position. Who was the sovereign? How were governors general appointed? What changed in 1931? Who gave the Canadian government the authority to appoint the Governor General? Did they simply assume this authority? Could they issue letters patent? In 1945, Walter Cool, a member of Parliament from Alberta, addressed the House of Commons and presented a detailed speech about the constitutional problems. He clearly outlined the current status and the actions that should be taken. However, no action was taken. In 1947, Prime Minister Mackenzie King issued letters patent, appointing a Governor General. These letters patent were signed only by Mackenzie King. To this day, only the Lord High Commissioner of Great Britain, the Crown and Chancery, can issue letters patent. Nobody else has the power or authority to issue letters patent. The last ones that were issued are dated March 23, 1931. In 1948, the Income Tax Act was implemented by an illegitimate Parliament of Canada and signed by an illegitimate Governor General, Harold Alexander of Tunis. In 1952, the Royal Style and Titles Act was enacted by an illegitimate Parliament of Canada, in which the Parliament of Canada assented that Elizabeth II can proclaim herself to be the Queen in right of Canada.
The moment the Queen puts her signature on this document, it becomes law. It will be witnessed later. The Constitution is now home. A fanfare in the background, as you can hear.
In 1976, Walter Cool, a member of Parliament from Alberta, wrote a letter to René Lévesque, Premier-elect of Quebec, explaining that Quebec does not need to seek a formal separation because the province has been completely independent and sovereign since December 11th, 1931, just like every other province. How can you be divorced when you have never been married? In 1982, Pierre Elliott Trudeau initiated the grand deception that is called the Constitution Act of Canada, also known as the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. An illusion, as we will see, which many people strongly believe to be factual truth. Trudeau is said to have patriated, which means to transfer legislation to an autonomous country from its previous mother country, the defunct and meaningless BNN Act 1867 to Canada. Why did he only bring a photocopy? Why does the original BNN Act 1867 still reside in the parliamentary archives of Great Britain? Trudeau urged all provinces to ratify, which means to give formal consent to make something official, the document, so that Canadians could enjoy their new constitution as soon as possible. Did all the provinces sign? Was it ever ratified? Section 58 of the Canada Act, 1982, states that this act would only come into force by proclamation issued by the Queen or the Governor General, and only if the conditions of Section 59 were met. Section 59 is equally important to comprehend. Subsection 1, paragraph 23, 1. A shall come into force in respect of Quebec on a day to be fixed by proclamation issued by the Queen or the Governor General under the Great Seal of Canada. Subsection 2. A proclamation under subsection 1 shall be issued only where authorized by the Legislative Assembly or Government of Quebec. Subsection 3. This section may be repealed on the day paragraph 23, 1. A comes into force in respect of Quebec and this act amended and renumbered Consequentially, upon the repeal of this section, by proclamation issued by the Queen or the Governor-General under the Great Seal of Canada. The key phrase here is, in respect of Quebec. Section 23. Minority language educational rights. Citizens of Canada, whose first language learned and still understood is that of the English or French linguistic minority population, have the right to have their children receive primary and secondary school instruction in that language in that province. Recall Section 59, subsection 3, in respect of Quebec. This section may be repealed on the day paragraph 23, 1A, comes into force in respect of Quebec, and this act amended and renumbered consequentially upon the repeal of this section by proclamation issued by the Queen or the Governor-General under the Great Seal of Canada. This means that only Quebec would lose their educational right in the French language. What were the steps to ratify and enact the Canada Act, 1982? 1. All provinces would need to sign Schedule B of the Act, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. 2. Quebec would need to authorize a proclamation to enact Section 23, 1A of the Act. 3. Section 23, 1A would be enacted through a proclamation. 4. Section 59, 3 would be enacted through a proclamation to repeal Section 59 and renumber the Act. 5. Section 58 would be enacted through a proclamation to pass the Act. A total of 3 proclamations were needed to pass the Act. Which of these steps have been completed? None. But what about the proclamation from 1982? From the Royal Proclamation, 1982. Now know you that we, by and with the advice our Privy Council for Canada, do by this our proclamation declare that the Constitution Act 1982 shall, subject to Section 59 thereof, come into force. Recall, subject to Section 59 means 2 proclamations must be made before the final proclamation to pass the Act, Section 58, could be made. This Royal Proclamation, 1982, is only a proclamation stating that there will be a proclamation in the future. Nothing was passed. Nothing was enacted. There is no Constitution. There is no Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The Royal Proclamation 1983 had nothing to do with the passing of the Canada Act 1982. This act simply converted the status of Aboriginal people from sovereigns to persons. Even the 1987 Meech Lake Accord and the 1992 Charlottetown Accord failed to enact the Canada Act 1982, also known as the Constitution Act 1982. Reminder, everything since December 11th, 1931 has been illegitimate, null and void. Since the fraud has obviously continued, why would Quebec not speak up and call it out? Maybe the over $12 billion in equalization payments that Quebec has received on average each year has played a role. Let's take a look at the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Section 1. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in its subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. This gives the government the option to ignore the Charter, and it is why the courts often side with the government. Section 7. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. What is a person? Section 32. This charter applies to the Parliament and Government of Canada, and to the legislature and government of each province. Does the charter apply to the living men and women or only to persons? A charter is a reservation of a ship or a written grant by which a corporation is founded and its rights and privileges are defined. A ship needs to be chartered to land it and reflag it. A person is a legal fiction. A corporation is also a legal fiction, but not a person. The charter was meant to create a ship at sea, which was intended to bring maritime law onto the land. Through persons, the living men and women would be brought under maritime law jurisdiction. This is why all provinces needed to sign the charter. A charter differs from a constitution in this, that the former is granted by a foreign government, while the latter is established by the people themselves. There is no lawfully established independent country called Canada. There is a geographical area that is comprised of sovereign nations, also known as provinces. How exactly is Canada defined in the Interpretations Act, 1985? Canada includes the internal waters of Canada and the territorial sea of Canada. Canadian waters includes the territorial sea of Canada and the internal waters of Canada. Internal waters means the internal waters of Canada and includes the airspace above and the bed and subsoil below those waters. Territorial sea means the territorial sea of Canada and includes the airspace above and the seabed and subsoil below that sea. The land is not included anywhere. Why? Because they lost access to the land when the Dominion ended with the Statute of Westminster, when the land was naturally returned to the people. Through the person, the all-caps name on all forms, IDs, licenses, passports, birth certificates, etc., you have submitted yourself to operate within maritime law. You have only those privileges that the corporation grants to you. Those do not include unalienable rights. What is the solution? How do we get out of this? Do we want to get out of this? Educate yourself. Learn these facts. Break the patterns and the indoctrination, like celebrating Canada Day and waving the Canadian flag. Educate your children because they are the ones building the future. Using the Socratic method to break through the brainwashing, asking simple questions instead of presenting facts, educate your family, friends, and neighbors. Offer help, kindness, and patience to those that have awoken from the deep sleep and are desperately looking for answers and support. When the people in each sovereign province are ready, a constitutional convention will be held to elect delegates and agree on a provincial constitution, accepted by a majority of the people, after which a de jure, lawful government is seated. This will all need to be done without corporate interference of any kind, for example, bar-carded attorneys. Only after each province has been properly established with a constitution and a de jure government, all provinces can then, if they desire to do so, hold a convention to discuss a federation of the provinces. We have been living under communist tyranny as slaves within a corrupt, corporate, yet illegitimate system based on maritime law for decades. Some people like it, but most don't. Waving and displaying the Canadian flag is not a symbol of freedom and free spirit, because it is the symbol and trademark of an evil corporation. When you wave this flag, you are submitting yourself to the color of laws of the corporation. For many years, people did not want to hear the truth. The truth and its speakers were ridiculed and silenced. Lately, though, more and more people are suffering at the hand of communism, and they do not like it. They see that something is deeply wrong. Since the people in the landmass known as Canada have been indoctrinated for decades and conditioned to be obedient slaves of the system, many may have to suffer immensely to be broken enough to accept the truth and to have the will to change. If recent worldwide events are any indication, then nothing can stop what is coming.
You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete.